Hi there, we're back with Cathi Chamberlain here on We the People show. Cathi, let's get back to business here. What do you believe is the single biggest threat to the conservative grassroots right now? And hold on. Heck, working to address that. What's the biggest threat to the grassroots movement today?
Well, that's an easy one. When I wrote my Rules for Deplorables book back in 2019, the biggest threat was the left and Democrats. This time around, for sure, it's the rhinos. And I go through in my book kind of separating out and giving definitions for how a candidate actually begins his running and begins politics when he first gets into politics, and how that same candidate can move from being a fresh-faced, well-meaning conservative to how they can change throughout the years because they run into the establishment gets a hold of them, and then they become part of the uniparty, and then they become the whole swamp. I mean, so I kind of lead somebody and define each one of those, the deep state. They're real definitions for all of these that you hear all the time out there, the cabal. And so it's really good to get educated on that stuff. And so we have to change within the party. We have got to change the rhinos, friend, get them out of there. The establishment on both sides, actually, who's changing the Democrats is the DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America. They are full on communists.
They are.
And the Democrat Party is allowing them to run roughshod over their party. So it's like, and the problem is that the weak need Republicans in Congress. They're either weak need or they're greedy. They want the money. Okay, so they're easily bought. And what they're doing is they're selling us out to the communists. So that's when you get the uniparty, a branch of the Democrats and a branch of the Republicans start selling us out, and they become the uniparties. There's no difference between them at all, and so we have got
But
to get hold of that.
doesn't it dig a little bit deeper than that? That it's not just between the party members that we see a threat, it's also big tech, our media, and other influences, special interest groups, the unions, and so on, that influence the candidate. A lot of times, I think bribery is a big issue, that they get motivated by money and gifts and so on, even though they say, oh, I can't receive any gifts, yada, 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 but they do behind the scenes.
Yeah, you're
Isn't
absolutely
that
right.
part
That's
of the
law.
threat that we're experiencing with the insecure conservatives, those that don't really have a solid ground that they stand on?
Well, yes, of course, and they get lobbied all day long, and I mean things really have to change with the whole way politics are run, because they're spending very little time with the actual legislation that needs to get passed. Instead, they're just listening to their lobbyists. Let's say a pharmaceutical lobbyist comes and tells them, "Look, you gotta have this drug on the market, or you gotta let us advertise on TV or whatever." So that shapes the whole policy. And it's the lobbyists who have all the money. So they give a bunch of money to the candidate's campaign and say, "We'll help you here. You help us when it all comes out." That actually came out with Cloward Piven, which is in my first book, Rules for Deplorables. If people haven't read that yet, it's a counter to Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, and he worked really hand in hand with Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, who were big socialists, as was he. And socialists always end up to be communism. But they wrote strategy papers, and what they would do is they basically said this out loud, that they were going to go into the inner cities, and they said, which party do you think would work with us on this? We'll tell them, we'll give them money for their we'll raise money for their party, and votes from the inner cities. We'll get the people in the inner cities to vote for them. If they do the things we want to get done in our strategy papers, which were things like, throw a whole bunch of recipients on welfare. Okay, so that you implode welfare and it weakens, and then it just
But you
it
control
implodes on
people from
itself. And
within with that too.
yeah, exactly.
You
So it
control them
gets a
through
little
money. It's a
convoluted.
different form of slavery. It's just slavery through the state, not a private individual. So we never got rid of slavery. We just called it welfare.
That's very true. Yeah, exactly. So, the schools, the same thing. They got into indoctrinating all of our students. That was a Cloward Piven initial strategy. And so, now we're so far down the road on this stuff. This stuff started in the 60s, and some of it even before then. And we've been asleep at the wheel. So if you've been asleep at the wheel, it is time
To wake
to throw
up.
your hat in the ring and get busy.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
We'll see you soon.
Yes, thanks, Karina.